In my last video I had made 4 brews with the Grainfather and was making my 5th during the video, and that was a video of tips of things that I'd learned about brewing with the Grainfather. So I thought I'd make a video now about the actual beers that I've made, all 5 of them. There are different stages of production of course, but I think it's worth talking about them and what I'm trying to do. I talked about the first beer at the beginning of my last video, Pale Ale number 1. What I'm trying to do is get a standard go-to English Pale Ale and English Bitter recipe, so that, you know, if I need to make a batch of standard beer, someone asks me for some beer for a barbecue or a party, I can bang it out, know that it will be good and that people will like it. So the first brew is Pale Ale number 1. That's here, it's nearly finished now. I talked about it at the last, on the last video. I'll put the recipe up at the end just to remind people what it is. It's a basic crushed pale malt and 250 grams of crystal malt and then English hops in it. No water treatment at all for my first brew. My water is very hard, so I expected that the mash pH was going to be out, but I just wanted to see what would happen with a straight brew. Sure enough, I did a single stage 67 degrees Celsius mash for 60 minutes and the pH was 5.9, so a bit alkaline really. We're aiming for 5.3, 5.4, aren't we, just as we predicted. But the beers turned out okay, as it happens. I got an original gravity of 1046, the IBU was 43 for bitterness, and I pitched it with Saf Ale, or Safe Ale, not sure how you pronounce it, 04 English ale yeast, bog standard dried yeast. It fermented okay. I put it into a pressure barrel with 80 grams of white sugar. It was clear within about 10 days. That was, when was that I put it in the barrel? 10th of May, and we're now at the 5th of June, so not a month yet, and we've nearly drunk it. Here it is. It's nice and clear, pretty good head retention, a golden colour, a bit dark maybe for a pale ale. What do I think to it? It's really nice, people have liked it. Purists would say it's a bit sweet and has a bit too much body for a pale ale. It's not as hoppy as I would like. So what I need to do is get it a bit crisper, which may mean leaving out the crystal malt altogether and or trying a different yeast, I think. And play with the hops a bit more to get it a bit hoppier. But for a first brew, straight out of the Grainfather, pretty pleased with it really. So that's brew number 1. Let's leave that there. Brew number 2, well, that's another variation on the same recipe really. In fact, I put more crystal malt in it, 250 grams more, so 500 grams of crystal malt. The main difference is that I changed to American hops. I used Cascade on this brew just to see what difference that would make. 7.6% alpha acid, the Cascade hops. Other than that, the details are pretty much the same. No water treatment again. Saf Ale, English ale yeast, SO4, just the same. Here's the beer. I bottled this one, so as you can see the head's a little bit coarser. It's come out of the bottle. And because of that extra malt, it's a bit darker. Right behind it, you can see, a little bit darker than the first one. It's bitterer, so the hops, even though the alpha acid, the IBU calculation was about the same, it's a bit bitterer. I guess that's just the vagaries of, you know, different hops. Also, I think it's more highly carbonated, that makes it feel a bit fresher. It's pretty clear. It's maybe not quite as crystal clear yet as the first brew. Don't know if you can see that, but pretty clear. So that's brew 2. Beer 3, I wanted to start on the bitter recipe that I want. And this is the first time that I used a recipe from a book as a starting point. I used Grainfather Camera's Brew Your Own British Ale, and I used the Timothy Taylor Landlord recipe as the starting point, which adds a small amount of black malt to get the colour. It also adds a little bit of roast malty dryness to the beer. Now, Timothy Taylor Landlord is one of my favourite beers. You can't really brew an exact copy of the beer using these recipes, and the author doesn't claim that. It's more in the style of that beer. So I use this as the starting point. I'll put the recipe that I used up at the end. So I used the hops that I had at the time, which was East Kent Goldings and Pilgrim, whereas the author uses Goldings and Styrian Goldings. The author doesn't say what yeast he uses, which I think is a major omission really, given the contribution that the yeast makes to the overall flavour and style of the beer. The beer has turned out really well, actually, pretty well anyway. It's here, this one. It's again really crystal clear. The colour's about right from my memory of Landlord. This is just a half pint glass, remember, so it'll look a bit darker in a pint glass. Got quite a nice fruity flavour, just not quite hoppy enough, maybe not quite bitter, not quite enough bitter bite to be the bitter that I'm looking for, but a good start. So I think I will drink all of this, brew it again and use the same yeast, because you know the yeast probably contributing some of that fruitiness that I quite like, and play with the hops just to try to increase the bitterness and the hoppiness. For brew 4, it's back to pale ale. I've got hold of some pretty potent Amarillo hops. So this is another time when I turn to a book for inspiration, and this one is Greg Hughes' Homebrew Beer. This is a really good book, actually. It looks a bit, it's really well produced. Darling Kindersley publish it. Great illustrations, I recommend it. Loads of recipes in here, and what I really like is that Greg really tells you everything you need to know. You know, the mash profile, obviously the grain bill, etc., the hop addition profile, but also, for me, crucially, exactly which yeast he used. And in this case, Y yeast 1056 American Ale yeast. So I use this for inspiration. I use his hop addition profile. I didn't have any Carapils malts, so I couldn't make exactly the recipe. I mainly wanted to use his hop profile because I was in pursuit of that hoppiness that I'm trying to get. And here's the beer. It's a bit young yet. It's been in the barrel for a couple of pressure barrel. This one for a couple of weeks. It's beautifully clear. Again, this one. It should be pretty much the same colour as the first beer there, and it is, as you can see, because it's got the same amount, same sort of ingredient profile in it. Definitely got the hoppiness there. And that brings me to my 5th beer, which is this one. Now, I wanted to do something a bit different this time, so I decided to brew an Imperial Stout. And I found a recipe on Beersmith. But I only wanted to brew 15 litres, not the full, 40 pints. But that's fine. Beersmith will resize recipes for you. So I resized the recipe, and off I went. And even for 15 litres, this was, the biggest grain bill I've done so far. It was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 kilograms, something like that, of various ingredients. Pale malt predominantly, but then crystal malt, roasted barley, flaked barley, chocolate malt, black malt, flaked wheat, you name it, it went in it. And I followed the Grainfather instructions, which was 21 litres of mash water. The sparge then was only 4.5 litres, because the way the Grainfather calculation works is they're trying to get you to a total volume that will be right after the boil. So I was sceptical about whether 4.5 litres was going to get me the extraction that I needed. And this time my starting gravity, which should have been about 1090, was 1076. So that's well short of what I was expecting. A lot lower efficiency from that brew, which, you know, there's a lesson there really for me. I think in the future I would perhaps try a multi-stage mash maybe to see if that helps improve the extraction. Or I might probably sparge more and boil for longer, to be honest, override the sparge figure. Sparge it for longer, boil for longer, just to make sure I get the extract that I need. A 76 was respectable, and off it went, and it fermented well until it got to 5 days in or so. Then it just seemed to stop. Tested it and the specific gravity was 1032. I wanted it lower than that really, left it a few more days, nothing really shifted. I was about to go on holiday to Italy, as it happens. Didn't want to leave it doing nothing. So I hastily re-pitched some good old Safale SO4 into it after just rehydrating it, chucked it in, and within an hour it was off again, bubbling. Put a sleeping bag around it because we were having some pretty chilly nights, and went off on holiday to Tuscany in Italy. Whilst I was in Tuscany, Italy, by the way, found that there's a fantastic craft beer tradition in Italy and growing in Italy, and in particular came across this brewery. Petragnola has probably mashed up the name there, but they have these lovely 330ml bottles that look like little champagne bottles. So I've brought 6 back for this beer, along with all the other bottles that I'll need for it. So I was, as an aside, I was really impressed with craft beer in Italy, and I found a fantastic Italian craft beer shop in Lucca in Tuscany. This is the sticker on the front of my book. And if I can find a link to it, I'll put it up at the end of the video. It's just stuffed full of Italian craft beer. So, came back from holiday after 2 weeks with the Safale in here, and here we are. This is brew number 5. And we're now at about 1018, much nearer to where I wanted it to be. I'll fancy a little touch of vanilla in this, because I've had vanilla stout in the past and I really like that little taste of vanilla. So before I went on holiday, I put 2 natural vanilla pods in here, slit them down the middle, scoop the pips out, which is what the guys on the internet were saying, left it in. And here it is. It's going to be a long time maturing, this stuff, but it's getting there. It's got a lovely chocolatey smell. It's got chocolate, it's got roast malts, a little bit of coffee, nice bitterness balancing the residual sweetness. No vanilla that I can detect, to be honest, in there from those 2 pods. Maybe I'm expecting too much. So I might have to go with adding some natural vanilla essence, not the horrible chemical-y stuff you can get, but the true essence that's extracted from vanilla pods. I just want a tiny hint of vanilla. I don't want a vanilla stout as such. So there you are, 5 beers, all brewed straight out of the Grainfather. That's the only way I brew now. Many years ago I used to brew with bags and buckets and bins and goodness knows what else, but now it's Grainfather all the way. All successful in that they're all fine, drinkable beers. Yes, I'm working towards the classic beer I want to get, but they've all been successful. That's not a bad endorsement, is it? Okay, happy brewing.